Just some of the headlines out of Chicago. It's pretty dire up there when you look at the migrant situation and the overall cost estimated by the end of this year being $255 million. Another headline when it comes to the migrant situation, Mayor Brandon Johnson looking to have base camps set up, tents for migrants to be housed so they can get out of police stations. You've also got a migrant that was arrested for blocking traffic and getting into a scuffle with police. Again, just some of these particular headlines, including 2 people held up by masked man with gun in Naperville. That's Naperville, not Chicago, let alone what's going on in Chicago on the streets. And to talk more about that, joining us right now is reporter William J. Kelly. You see him really all over the place on X, formerly known as Twitter. He also made an appearance on Fox News, and now he appears here with me, Greg Bishop, at Springfield's Morning News. Good morning, William. How you doing up there?
Very good. Thank you. God bless you, Greg.
So we've got a stack of headlines. Of course, public safety is paramount. You've got people on social media. Even the governor retweeted a post from a visitor. I think that person was from Colorado, and they're going around making jokes about how unsafe it was in various parts of tourist-heavy Chicago, kind of poking fun at it. But really, that social media user was just essentially trying to say, hey, the city's safe. Well, there's some things happening over the weekend highlighting how there are some areas that just aren't safe, even those heavy tourist areas. What do you know?
Shame on the governor for mocking the victims of violent crime. That really turns my stomach, Greg. There are DePaul students, young girls, punched in the face, robbed of their belongings, valuables, phones, book bags. You know, I remember as a student how important, how expensive the books were. You know, it's not like the thieves are going to do anything with books. So the bare minimum, they should have at least allowed the students to keep their books, Greg. We had 2 tourists out in front of a place called Miller's Pub, one of my favorite restaurants in Chicago, that were, again, attacked by a gang of 8 to 10 people. Who are still out there. No suspects, no descriptions of the suspects, nobody in custody, no leads. In fact, the police, it took them 2 hours to get to Miller's Pub. Now, I don't know if anyone listening has ever been to Miller's Pub. It's essentially right a block away from Michigan Avenue, across the street from the Art Institute of Chicago. It's not like the police don't know how to get to Miller's Pub. But you know, in the defense of the police, they're babysitting migrants. They have a full-time job now babysitting migrants at police stations, at airports. As you mentioned, I was just reporting from O'Hare Airport. Last week there were 400 migrants. Now there are 2,000. So as a reporter, I live in constant fear that I won't have the exact right number, Greg. You know what I'm talking about. You know, what is the exact number that is being spent? What is the exact number of migrants? What is the exact number of people shot? Well, in Chicago, that number could double in a day. So, you know, one day it's 400, the next day it's 2,000. One day it's 20 million, the next day it's 300 million. You know, and I remember, just as a Chicagoan, as I guess at this point, as an American, I remember when there was accountability. I remember if a politician couldn't keep track of, couldn't explain where $300 million was spent, that politician was in serious trouble. Okay, if not legal trouble, certainly in trouble with the voters. Now, okay, fine, we're going to spend $300 million building tents, winterized tents for migrants. Terrific. Really? Is that terrific?
And William, I do want to just take a look here at this graphic that apparently Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson showed Chicago aldermen about the increased costs being close to $255 million by the end of the year. And that includes everything from housing and feed and clothes. And at first it was, $17.5 million in 2020, and then it ballooned to, $115 million, and the city anticipates another $123 million. These are taxpayer dollars, a total $257 million. William, where in the world is Chicago going to get that money?
Well, once again, shame on our mayor, all of our elected officials. It's a complete fail, Greg. And, I'm surprised nobody's even mentioning the president of Venezuela. Maybe this guy is also responsible for something, But at any rate, complete fail across the board, in my opinion. They keep talking about a migrant crisis. I think it's a Chicago citizen crisis. The citizens of Chicago are also suffering as a result of this. Mayor Johnson, his answer is, quote, the people of Chicago are going to have to sacrifice. Really? We haven't sacrificed over the years of Lightfoot lockdown and looting, and now we're going to have to sacrifice because of more incompetence and corruption. Mayor Johnson, violent crime and migrant crisis. I'm not sure that what I'm really worried about is not only that the incompetent and corrupt politicians don't understand their role of keeping Chicagoans safe. I'm starting to wonder if our citizens have been so beaten down that they don't understand that they have a right to be kept safe.
William, some of the other things, of course, we're looking at, you mentioned the base camps that the mayor is looking to set up of tents as the weather continues to turn towards more winter. And this is going to be to help move those migrants out of Chicago police stations. And we saw John Catanzara's video a couple of weeks ago, which was just unbelievable to see. You couldn't even walk through the lobby of a police station, several police stations, because the migrants there were sleeping on the floor there. But what about the homeless population? The homeless population in Chicago, surely that's not been solved either. Are they going to get these base camps set up with tents and heating, whatever? Are they going to use natural gas to heat these? Or what about the homeless population in Chicago?
Well, God bless you, Greg. You're asking the right. You are asking the questions that would get you in a lot of trouble if you ask those questions in Chicago, Greg. So good thing that you're not you're in the city of Chicago right now. I believe that it's important to study history because there has never been a time in history where a story about tent cities ended well. Okay. So this is why it's important to elect people who read. We have a homeless problem in Chicago. Forgive me if I'm repeating myself. I haven't slept. But the last time I was at O'Hare doing a report, it was on the homeless Americans that were living at the airport themselves. Well, now, who would have thought that was back in February that just this handful of months later, we would be reporting that the city of Chicago kicked homeless Americans out of the airport to make way for migrants. I don't think that this is going to end well. I'm just starting to wonder who's going to end up with the short end of the stick here. Is it going to be corrupt and incompetent politicians? Is it going to be migrants, or is it just going to be Americans?
William, something else too, a couple of things here before we have to head off to a break, but you got Mayor Johnson holding an event with the Commercial Club of Chicago, and he was asked about crime. And on Friday, he talked about how it's something he thinks about every day, is trying to make Chicago safe. He talked about hiring 24,000 young people in Chicago as part of an annual summer jobs program, but here we are, school year started back up. He talks about it being a long-term situation he's dealing with and having constitutional policing, he says. But as you mentioned, I mean, you've got law enforcement who are delayed in responding to crimes. And you look at the arrest record, and it's pretty abysmal. While the mayor says it takes 2 years to get a new police officer up to speed, what do you see on the streets as far as any kind of immediate relief? Are these summertime jobs, did they really help?
Absolutely not. They only made the situation worse by all accounts. Police officers are telling me that their hands are tied. They're babysitting migrants. These police stations, I hate to say it, Greg, I don't typically talk about diarrhea on, but when I do, apparently it's on national TV and radio. But the police stations apparently the toilets are overflowing. The migrant, there's an outbreak of diarrhea. Apparently, the police officers are worried that, for their own families, when they go home at the end of a shift, to their own families, that they're bringing some disease. This is a serious issue. A young migrant girl on her way from Texas died on a bus of diarrhea symptoms, etc. If you look at the numbers of people around the world who die of diarrhea, it's really a very serious issue. It wasn't an issue in Chicago, though, I have to say, until recently. But we are, instead of really moving forward and having downtown people returning to downtown, to the offices, to the schools, to the instead, we're dealing with a migrant diarrhea outbreak in the city of Chicago. I mean, who would have? I never would have thought that would be the headline, but it is. In fact, that when you mentioned the migrant that was fighting with police in the middle of the street, preventing them from actually, serving the people of Chicago. It was over the issue of using a bathroom at the police station. So I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with now in the city of Chicago, the city that I was raised to believe was the greatest city in the history of the world. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I never would have thought that we would have this this type of be dealing with these kinds of problems, these kinds of this lack of competent leadership. And it's only getting worse in the public schools. Even the president of the teachers union sends her son to a Catholic school. She doesn't want him caught up in the middle of some kind of a city of Chicago public school that is turned into a foster, basically a foster home / migrant shelter. The city of Chicago is really in a shambles, and shame on our governor Pritzker for mocking the victims of violent crime. That really strikes at my heart, Greg, to hear that this morning.
William Kelly, give us the website and the social media channels people can follow you.
Absolutely. If you would, reporterwilliamjkelly.com is where people can find out about my lawsuit that is expanding now to Mayor Johnson. He doesn't want to let me into City Hall press conferences, just like Mayor Lightfoot doesn't want to take my questions. These questions need to be asked, Greg, and I intend to do it.
Greatly appreciate your time. We'll definitely check back in next week. Be safe up there, okay?
God bless you. Thank you, Greg.
It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk.